Welcome to Gallant Conversations. Gallant is a business-to-business consultancy specializing in industrial innovation.
We drive growth for our clients through strategies and insights in brand management and strategic communications.
If you're in an industry focused on progress at the macro level, we're here to facilitate a conversation, starting now.
Hello. This is another Gallant Conversation. I have a privilege to share with you today Sean Graham. Sean Graham, you're all over the place. Just tell me a little bit more about kind of, because you're in Houston right now.
Mm-hmm.
And, you live in Florida. You also have some ties in LA. Tell me a little bit more about kind of where you're from, what you got going on, background, all that good stuff.
Absolutely, yeah. First off, thanks for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
Dude, thank you.
And yeah, I was born out in LA on Biosphere 1. It's, this little planet in our corner of the galaxy, and grew up with a kind of like a mixed background. Mom was a Romanian immigrant, dad was African American, and it was always kind of in between different cultures and communities. And I think that's kind of kept with me. Traveled a lot. Even when I was young, we would always move every couple of years, and that's when I ended up in Texas. Eventually, in like junior high and high school, out here. Went to Rice for a bit, and so Texas has been home in many ways. And as a kid, I felt kind of like a Texifornian, Cali-Texan, whatever you want to call it. And 2 years ago, I moved out to Cape Canaveral in Florida to get closer to where the rockets are, because the rumbles are real and the rockets are regular. So that's a bit of where I'm at right now.
That's awesome. Yeah, and I guess y'all, launch hasn't let up, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, y'all are just, especially you being in the thick of it, right? There's like launches, every other day or like sometimes twice a day with SpaceX now?
3 times a day sometimes, because Vandenberg as well. We've never had that. There's just never been a thing.
How long has that been going on, do you think? Like to this point in which it's at now?
Well, it's really the past couple years in particular. For context, 3 years ago, it was like 57 launches from Cape Canaveral, which is still was a record at the time. Last year was 90-something, and this year it could be up to 120 plus. And that trend is just going to keep going upwards, where there's going to be daily launches. And we look at, call it 100 years ago, almost to the day, we had never had planes. And then we had a couple, kids out on a beach in Kitty Hawk put together a little plane. And fast forward 60 years, we land up on the moon. And fast forward another 60, we're going back to it. So it's, the trends are accelerating, and we're on that kind of rapid increase where spaceports and space launches will be just as common as air travel before too long, in my opinion.
Yeah, and we met through a nonprofit, Earthlight Foundation.
Yeah.
And y'all got an annual conference, expo, a space ball, and all that stuff, right? And it was a pleasure and privilege to be part of that as well. It's a lively group, and to your point with the culture, right? And Ray Tomlinson, who's the founder of it, I guess you could say, find your tribe, right?
Yes.
And that kind of speaks to kind of your roots, right? Where you kind of have this melting pot of culture within you as an individual, and then that just fits seamlessly, right?
Absolutely.
That's kind of an interesting point. And so you're part of Earthlight Foundation, and then you have tell me a little bit more about what you're doing now and
For the past 3 or 4 years now going on, since I joined the board of the Earthlight Foundation. And Rick has been the space revolutionary out there for years, fighting the good fight, and honestly opening up a lot of not only the inspirational parts of it, but pushing on the regulation, testified in front of Congress a few times to make it possible for the new companies that we have today, like SpaceX and Blue Origin, to launch, and then founded Earthlight, Space Fund, and a few other things. And he was an early mentor, kind of advisor, and really helped me find my space culture. And that's what I think Earthlight really represents, is a tribe of kind of the space faithful in many ways. And when we think about the great causes that have helped push people and humanity out into the frontiers, there's certain religious fervor that can be helpful for that.
Yeah.
And Earthlight really represents that. Let's bring the light of life to the places now dead. Let's go out and explore and experience all there is in the universe. And let's not only honor the past, but let's evolve humanity. And that, is where we've had the New Worlds Conference that's been in Austin until the past couple years when we moved it here to Houston at the Space Center Houston. I think we were still in Austin when we gave you the award for the Tech Space Initiative, which is, a massive accomplishment.
Thank you for that, and Rick and the whole board on that. That's really, I really much appreciate that. That's great.
Yeah, and I think, as that nonprofit arm was starting up is about the same time I started my company, Karman Line. And the Karman Line is that thin blue line we see of Earth from outer space. And, whenever astronauts have gone above that and look back on Earth is when they see not only they get bathed in that Earth light, but they experience what Frank White has coined the overview effect, and they get literally an overview of Earth and see that there's no 911, there's no one else out there to call. This is our thin blue, the thin blue line that protects our pale blue dot, and this is all we have for now. And everyone that has ever come, everyone we've ever known, all of our families and histories and stories come from this little biosphere one, as we might say it, and it really kind of makes people think about the bigger things and not sweat the small stuff and have this kind of urgent feeling of a stewardship for the Earth. And so things like the environmental movement had come from space and astronauts. The views we get from satellites nowadays allow us to really see what's happening here on Earth, and turns out there's no borders.
Yeah.
That those are not only manufactured by us for obvious reasons, but that we're still one big tribe. And that's really, I think, that space is the great uniter and can bring us together. And so it's not just the peace through power, but peace through space philosophy that I feel we are stepping into as humanity.
Yeah, and well, before you got my mind racing. Like whenever we talk space over here, like it's just like there's so many things that you say, and I'm like, okay, we can go through that, but let's try and get a little organized on it, because you mentioned the safety and stuff like that when you're out there past the Karman Line or whatever. There is no turning back, there is no help, and like I, to my understanding, which you can share a little bit more in depth, is the Space National Guard Reserve, right? Like that's a critical component, right? We have that for other different activities and stuff of that nature, but not for space. And as it starts to become a little bit more active in low Earth orbit and such, I think that's something that we need to get figured out pretty quick, especially with, when you had the Earthlight Foundation and the Space Cowboy Ball, you had Jared Eisman there, and, he went outside in orbit twice, right? Like what were to happen if him and his crew just... like nothing, right? Like, what are your thoughts there? Whoops. Like, shoot. Yeah, that's all we can really say.
Well, we can use metaphor parallels. We look at the old kind of earliest explorers, right? I think if one word were to summarize humanity, we're explorers, and we've not only evolved to explore everything on Earth, but we did a lot of that by, go out into the oceans and into the seas. And imagine you take a little dinghy, a little rowboat, or whatever kind of Spanish galleon even, and you get out there. It's just kind of out in the open, and that's the best we have today in terms of laws or regulation or the enforcement of the international oceans. Is what space really is. It's just kind of open waters right now. And fortunately, there's not a lot of space pirates floating around.
Not yet, baby.
Exactly. Rick might argue he was one of the first because he took over the Mir space station.
I feel like I've seen him post where he calls himself a space pirate or something like that.
He flew a pirate flag from the Mir space station. I mean, Dennis Tito did it, but he sent it up, and he got that whole mission.
Got to do it. I love that. That's great.
And we're living in that age where like these things are real. And Jared Isaacman, I think, represents one of the great explorers that they're Ernest Shackletons that have gone out there, in the past and really pushed the parameter of what's possible. He did the deepest space flight ever a couple months back. as the first private citizen. And outside of the Apollo era, like, no one had gone further. He brought not only himself and his crew, but he took women, the furthest women have ever been into space. And this was the second time he had basically self-funded a commercial flight. The last one was Inspiration 4 in 2021, where he gave 3 other people the chance to go to space for the first time, and they did a 3-day orbit. And that was, again, record-breaking. They had done the deepest orbit at that point. And the first commercial crew brought up Syard and Proctor and Chris Zembrowski and Haley Arsenault, and I think that, again, represents not only the diversity of the opportunities that we have now, because it's not just big government rockets that are on government missions. We have private individuals that can just pave our own way. And that is, again, a similar example of when the great frontiers in the ocean were explored and the great frontiers of the Wild West were explored. Yeah. And now we're in the final frontier, or the high frontier, of exploring space. And I feel so grateful and thankful that we're alive in this time when it's like the real space age. We had old space. New space was like 25 or so years ago, but now it's real. It's the real space age. And we're part of it.
Yeah, and I mean, before we get into kind of some of your projects and what you're leading up, because it's really kind of cool and interesting. Again, you bring up a lot of stuff that just rattles my mind. So recent news was, we represent a bunch of different clients in different industries, and oil and gas, petro, chemical, energy transition, geothermal, a couple of space defense and stuff, not as much. But there's been some layoffs recently in oil and gas, and consequently as well, you see a lot of layoffs in with recently Boeing and SLS and Artemis program potentially kind of on its last leg, and then also Blue Origin, the commercial startup with Jeff Bezos. So I mean, is it just kind of this transition with the new administration, be it President Donald Trump? Is it the Elon Musk Doge initiative? Or is this just kind of like the writing on the wall where we're transitioning from kind of this cost plus contract to fixed contract costs? I mean, and what are your thoughts there?
I'm not the world's preeminent expert, but I've got some opinions on it.
Yeah.
I think a couple of things you mentioned. One is, as far as I'll start with the Artemis mission, right? The mission is different from the vehicle, and I think that's an important distinction to make. The mission is, we want to go back to the moon, we want to go onto Mars, we want to spread humanity out there, and we got to do that. Apollo was a mission. We used the Saturn V to get there, but then we made modifications over time. But these were all Apollo missions, right? That was that. Artemis is the sister of Apollo in mythology, but it's the next version of it, right? And SLS is the vehicle that we're using to do that. And the Space Launch System, led by Boeing, has come from that older style of cost plus contracting, and it is actually very old technology. It's 1960s technology. It's not reusable, and when it was authorized, that was, maybe you could call it, the only option. But in the 20 years since Blue Origin and SpaceX have been founded, we now have New Glenn launched a month ago. We have Starship launching its 7th flight, a month ago. It's a very different world, not only here but abroad. China's kicking it, with not only their government organizations, but there are semi-private companies that are doing things. A lot of it's replicating
semi-private.
Yeah, exactly. What's here, but there's so much innovation happening there. India's killing it. Russia's still flying a lot of the same tech because it's reliable. The Soyuz used to be, until SpaceX, until 2021, Soyuz for a decade was the only way we could get back and forth to the space station, even with American astronauts. Yeah. And I think that, again, is another example of how space really brings us together. The ISS is celebrating its 25th year right now, and it's kind of what cooled down the Cold War. And space, when we solve for space, we can solve for Earth, and not just from a technology side, but from a cultural side. And I think even as we're fighting in conflicts and proxy wars around the world, we still collaborate through some of this. And I think that's the opportunity going forward. So I just wanted to start with that, this mission for humanity to go back to the moon, to go onto Mars and beyond. That's not going to end.
Yeah.
How we do that might shift. And so as Boeing and Blue Origin and all these other companies are figuring out how to operate in this new dynamic, there's going to be changes. And the layoffs, I think, are part of that. I think, the original SLS program is specifically a dinosaur mentality. And that's probably why there's going to be a rapid shift. But there's also because there are new opportunities from Blue Origin and SpaceX in particular to get back to the moon on another vehicle. As Jared Isaacman has been nominated and likely going to be confirmed quickly, here as the new NASA administrator, I think he'll also bring a bit of that kind of fresh perspective.
He's been there and done that.
Been there, yeah.
Yeah.
One of the few NASA administrators that will have gone to space. Not that there haven't been it before.
Mm-hmm.
Bill Nelson had been, and Charlie Bolden, and there's been others. But the idea is he brings a bit of a he's not legacy government. He's run his own companies. He was an entrepreneur from an early age and started his own company, Shift4.
Yeah, Shift4 Payments.
16.
And like in Starbucks and stuff, you'll see that, right? It's one of those things where you just you interact with it every day live, but you would never freaking know it.
Yeah.
And that guy started it.
And I think that's the beauty. And coming back to your question around layoffs, I think it's just business,
Capitalism at its finest, potentially.
In the sense of the transition, we've got this convergence of AI, of automation, that's creating a whole bunch of efficiencies. And so some people and jobs and roles are just redundant. So I think that's a big part of the layoffs that are happening. And it's not just within space. Tech companies and Microsoft and everyone's announcing layoffs. Past 2 years, we've seen a revolution in technology and AI specifically. That's just going to accelerate. So the job market in general is shifting. The automation that's accompanying that in terms of physical automation is also replacing and replicating a lot of the human jobs.
Yeah.
And that's why our skill sets are going to shift. And this is why STEAM programming or science, technology, engineering, arts, and the maths, and maybe throw in another A for agriculture, are important. And it's not that they that's a big bucket, but I think people are going to change the way we learn, and as these things are happening at the same time, and that's where the job skills of tomorrow can quickly be matched by the education of today. And traditionally, that's taken a long time to catch up to each other because the industry has been so separate from the education institutions. And I think now, because of the rise of the digital age over the past couple decades, let's call it, and with the rise now of AI, personalized learning, and the kind of clarity we are getting because of the efficiencies of corporate business now being driven in one way by profit incentives to be more efficient, but also by the competition that's out there. Because there's competition, we can't rest on our laurels. And that's why Boeing is having to evolve, because now SpaceX and Blue Origin have made it so that they're not the only option. And it's not that Boeing is the only company behind SLS.
Oh yeah, it's a whole consortium. It's Lockheed Martin, Raytheon in the mix. There's.
Between engines, between the Orion capsule, between all the different parts. And again, I think that's another example where traditionally the space industry and a lot of industry, because of the cost plus models that have come from the past, which again, for context, cost plus means whatever you need, however long you need to make it, I'll pay you that in 20 plus. Because it came from wartime.
Yeah.
We needed to mobilize the nation around these big wartime efforts. And that urgency, I think, is the same motivation. We can't wait. And I think for that same reason is why we can't rely on old systems anymore. The problems we need to solve in space, the opportunities we have, but also in order to protect humanity and start to take advantage of these opportunities that are in front of us, we've got to hold people to a higher standard, and that's where private business and partnering with government and ensuring that we're driving towards the best for the public needs in terms of humanity's greatest endeavor is not only exciting but presents these challenges that are really opportunities, and entrepreneurs have the opportunity to capitalize on that is more so than anyone else.
Yeah, and I think that, again, you bring up all these points, and it's just when we were advocating for kind of some matters pertaining to the state of Texas, I mean, and don't quote me on it now, it's been 2-3 years now, but the Artemis program and Boeing and stuff like that, the cost plus contract, I mean, they're spending $5-6 billion a year building this rocket for 20-25 years. 25 years go by, you're spending $35 billion now with taxpayers' money on a rocket that at the time had never flown, and now has flown like once, scrubbed, boatload of times. Like, so there's that need. And I mean, you mentioned SpaceX and Blue Origin with their rockets, more so kind of heavy class. You know, where we're talking about eventually, you know, taking large, massive payload, like up to 100, 150 civilians, commercial astronauts to the lunar surface one day. That's exciting. But also kind of the vehicle to kind of get us to Mars, you know, help develop out the infrastructure on the lunar surface and all that. But that stuff. Gosh, I swear I was having a point to this, but like now you have also the low Earth orbit, which, you know, SpaceX is kind of like said, oh, you know, other companies, Firefly, Rocket Lab, like y'all can handle low Earth orbit. We're just going to 100% focus on, you know, getting to Mars, right? Like, what are your thoughts, like, especially you in the Cape, like, you know, you see like spin launch and all that stuff, like all these other different, like how many rocket manufacturers are based at, like...
If I were to quote a number, I know I'd be wrong, but I can say it's in the tens, right? Because we've got our homegrown company, Via Space, which is going to be testing their rockets by, if not this year, by next year, which most people have, have not heard of, but like there's some smaller kind of homegrown. Relativity's launched from out there.
That's right.
Stoke is coming in pretty soon. Then, you've got your Blue, your SpaceX. You've still got ULA. You've still got kind of, again, it's like a mix of like legacy, but like new approach.
ULA is an interesting one, right? Because that's that partnership with Boeing and Lockheed, right? What's going to happen with that, you think?
I mean, you know, someone might buy it, and I know that people have been bidding. Sierra Space is also another, like, has a lot of legacy talent in time, but they're pushing the parameter again on some of the new stuff with their Dream Chip, which is kind of like a mini shuttle. But we've got now not just rockets, but real spaceships also being made. So, you know, the difference is that a spaceship you take off and you land on. You don't just blow off into space and, you know, throw it away.
Yeah, that's huge.
Those are coming. We've got the Radiant Aerospace now that's also working on hypersonics, so you can do vertical launch or horizontal launch and takeoff. So, you know, you don't need a big launch pad near the ocean. You can do, you know, permitting aside, you can take off and land on a runway, and it's like the Jetsons today. We are living pretty much in the Jetsons age. We've got, you know, skyscrapers and towers where you live above the clouds. I don't know how umpteen different companies are working on flying cars, some of which are already approved.
Yeah, the eVTOL stuff sounds super exciting. I can't wait for that. Like, especially with y'all, like Orlando. Don't bring a car. Just freaking go from Cape, Orlando, and
straight there. They've already got, not only like are they operating, not commercially yet. Like you can't just book a ride today. But the tech's there. It's just a matter of, some of it's the regulation catching up, and some of it is, you know, the viable business model around it. It's still not quite safe enough yet for us to, you know, kind of unleash it. There's enough car accidents today. Imagine if we start filling the skies.
FAA is going to have a headache. I mean, especially right now. Shoot. And that's another point.
Legacy, like, they need to be updated. They need to find new ways. We have a huge need for traffic, you know, controls. And this is again where I think the skill sets of people needs to match the job opportunities that are being driven by innovation, but also by the changing human needs. And I feel like between the, you know, the Hyperloop solutions to transportation, the automation in cars and driving, the availability of new airways and vehicles, like, again, we are living in the science fiction to science fact age. And then the next 5-10 years, it's so hard to predict the future now because things are moving so rapidly. But that's what really excites me. And I think both Florida and Cape and Texas have played, will continue to play a big part of that. You know, the first moon landings. It was kind of like the second word. The first word was Houston. First word is technically contact, because that's when they actually, you know, touched the moon. But Houston, you know, we've landed, kind of thing, because Space City had given a bunch of the land to Johnson Space Center. Rice University was a big part of that, and again, just these kind of great examples of public-private partnerships is why we had that there. It's a similar play out in Florida, where the NASA land that is occupied by some of these private companies now is being leased out between them and the United States Space Force, which has inherited the history of the Army ballistic missile programs, the Air Force, and what is now the Space Force, a 5-year-old that is looking out for all of us in that sense, to ensure access to space for everyone, because not everyone has that priority, and that kind of goes back to one of your earliest questions of what happens when we're out there and something goes wrong. And it's not like they have Coast Guard, Space Guard ships floating around to this day, but we need to ensure and protect our assets, and NASA's great at exploration, but someone needs to ensure that when we have those up there, that they're not vulnerable to attack from cybersecurity, explosions, or just random stuff. And I think that's what we're kind of still figuring out as humanity is whose job is it to protect things out in international waters or international space, where I think the biggest changes that will happen rapidly to push humanity out into the cosmos might actually be lawyers and paperwork. Because today, that is one of the things limiting our ability to launch, and limiting our ability to innovate. And it's not that it's like a bogged down bureaucracy. We literally just don't know what the rules are or what they should be.
There are none. It's the Wild West. It's like what your point was, right? Yeah. Like the Wild West and, settling the Americas and going across the Atlantic. It's the same thing. Yeah, it's wild. One thing I want to bring up too, this is a tough one for me, and I think you're pretty well positioned to kind of provide some insight on it, which is the culture environmental aspect of space, right? Like, it's always challenging, especially with, a very opinionated face, Elon Musk, for the space industry, for the environmental groups, socially aware folks and stuff of that nature to get behind kind of the space industry. And, some of my experience too is like, and I don't think the Cape has this much of an issue as what South Texas SpaceX has down in Starbase in Boca Chica, which is, Fish Wildlife Refuge, EPA, FAA, and then maybe like 20 other government agencies and consent before just one freaking Starship launch, right? I think, y'all been doing it for so freaking long. Like, there's crews, FAA stuff, like you still have to kind of, shift some stuff around, but y'all are rolling with it. And it was really Boca Chica. SpaceX is the only guy in town. But it's interesting, right? And, I think there was like an EPA report before Starship 2 or 1, like maybe the first Starship, right? Where he was held back for like 5-6 months because he had to address 75 different environmental concerns pertaining to God knows what. And you go down to the Cape, and and all these launch facilities, like, they don't only just launch rockets there, they are preserving the environment at the same time. Like, I think, like, is it the Cape that has the largest indigenous, like, eagle population, if I'm not mistaken? And on top of that, like, you go down to the Cape, and it's like, you see turtles just, like, roaming around on the launch pad. Like, and SpaceX was getting, a problem with it because they were concerned about the turtles. And it's just like, okay, but if Florida's able to get away with it, why can't Texas? And so again, like, and I'm not saying get away with it in terms of like don't be concerned about the environmental repercussions or ramifications of your activity, because granted, everything there's a ramification. But like, how do you, like, with Earthlight Foundation, with Karman Line, and kind of some of this other stuff that you got focused up on, how do you, like, reach people to like really, get on board with just all this great technology and cultural components to the space industry?
Well, let's slip it off my head.
Oh, we're good, man.
But I think first thing, simple way to put it, is to space for Earth. Right? I know that a lot of people will complain about the money that's been spent on space and the billionaire boys and their big old toys. And at the end of the day, it's not that we're pushing the space program to escape Earth. This is a green paradise. This is like the best place to live by default, and like this is paradise right here. And that's something we should all, remind ourselves when we're feeling a little down or get it. Like, we are living on the best place in the cosmos that we could ever discover, right? We're born here and we're designed for it. It's perfect for us. This is the best place to live. But we want to maintain that. We've seen, a lot of pollution, a lot of rapid industry, changing our climate, and humans have made an impact on this place. And so people like Jeff Bezos started Blue Origin for the benefit of Earth. Like, that is their tagline. Because if we can start to move our big industry, if we can start to eventually mine asteroids, if we can start to build some free space colonies, we can always maintain this place. And who knows, something can go wrong. An asteroid could hit, now in a couple of years. And we've seen this recent asteroid that's gone from a 1.2 to like a 4% chance of hitting us.
That's a big jump.
Yeah, that's like 1 in 40. Like, that's pretty significant. We need to be better at it. Because what happens if that rocket, that asteroid comes at us? What happens if we get a big solar flare that wipes out all of our telecom systems? What happens if some other, nuclear war breaks out? We don't have a backup plan. So first off, to space, for Earth, right? We need to be able to go out and protect ourselves from rogue asteroids. This is what the DART program is. A couple of years ago, we literally threw a space DART, a satellite, at an asteroid, and just to see if we could. And imagine, like, you're sitting here literally trying to throw a dart all the way around the world to knock a bee out of a sparrow's mouth. Like, kind of like a fair equivalent of what we did. Pretty amazing. We also knocked off some boulders that might hit Earth or Mars in the future, but this is why we need to learn.
No big deal.
They'll burn up here. Mars, we'll figure that one out. But I think that's first part. When it comes to the environmental side, I think you're right. The Cape has been so good at it because it's been almost 100 years. It's 75 years of launching from Cape Canaveral. And the community has been used to that and has built out systems to operate, and has led to a frequency of launch where we can have 2, 3, 4, 5 launches a week and mitigate the environmental impact. Now, the second component to this, I think, is a cultural thing, right?
Yeah.
In Titusville, Florida, their tag is nature, history, and space. It's like literally in the DNA of the people in the community around there to emphasize nature, to honor the history, but also to push for the future, which is space. And so we've got manatees and dolphins and turtles and scrub jays and, yes, eagles on the... Again, my numbers might be off, but I think it's like 24,000 acres of private nature reserve that NASA maintains as around the launch facility. So there's a huge emphasis on protecting nature and honoring that. And we've got beautiful beaches out there. We have, this kind of clean, pristine water. And I think an example of the cultural aspect is it's kind of a very purple county, Brevard County, or what's called the Space Coast. You'll have your right-wing conservative politicians really concerned about the quality of the water, because that's where their shrimp and their manatees are at.
Fishing, stuff like that.
And I think Texas has that potential, and it's gonna step into that. What's happening down at Starbase, obviously, there's big rockets, there's big explosions, there was a lot of public land that's now private. There's all this kind of rapid change and growth and new industry that's coming in. It's probably been one of the biggest economic booms to the entire community there and on the south side of Mexico. So massive benefits for humanity, full stop. When it comes to the environmental causes, there's also mitigation efforts. So there's a lot of natural preserve that's coming in that Elon and SpaceX have bought up in order to kind of move some of that. And yes, there might be some disturbances. We might have to move some of the turtles from here to there. But that's real estate development. This is humanity. We've done this all the time. If I buy a plot of land and I need to build on it, and there's some type of, animal that's nesting there, it's my responsibility to make sure that I can move them safely and appropriately. And that's standard real estate development. So I think we need to take that mindset of, we can't hold back humanity's progress, but we need to do that in a way that can still honor the nature and the history around it. And I think Texas is going to learn that as launches increased.
Yeah, and it will be interesting. I mean, especially in the next 10, 15 years when, again, the Space Coast, the strategic location of Florida and the Cape is why we are launching from there. And it's very hard to do the same in anywhere else, in Texas in particular. Like you have a very narrow gap between Cuba and Florida to get through. And there's like, I've heard theories in which like you can like do a homes transfer or something of that nature and you can make it possible or whatever. But, yeah, no, that's super interesting. And God, I swear there's another point that I wanted to bring up, but let me kind of switch it, which is, okay, the environmental cultural aspect, yes. And then the economics of it, like, you know, some of the national security threats associated to space. Like, I was having a conversation with some folks about this, and I think I was sharing it with you earlier, which is like, you know, it's very hard for some people to justify the national security implication of space and then the investment into it because it doesn't directly touch our everyday life, right? Like, it's not something, again, like to space folks, we like, no, that's not right. Like, whatever. But like, again, like, you know, we're not manufacturing an iPhone in Asia and then bringing it over to the U.S. We're not doing that in the same context of space, right? In my mind, right? Like, there isn't a lunar economy present. So the lunar economy current day is financial transactions, trade, internet, utilities, stuff like that, like monitoring and Earth monitoring and stuff of that nature. So, like, when we talk about, like, the national security implications and stuff of that nature, right, it's like the U.S. Navy was instituted and developed out, and it's to protect trade routes, it's to ensure the safety of the U.S. dollar and the economy at large. With space and justifying that with a rocket, it's hard to make that, like, yes, indirectly, but not directly, because there is no trade between the space station and Earth. There is no trade per se. I mean, like, tell me if I'm wrong. I mean, like, what, like, again, like, I advocate for this stuff, but like,
how do we bring it home to people? You know, and I get that the cislunar economy, you know, is the current economy in space, if we want to call it that. This is satellites, but it's things like Starlink now, which is more and more people are getting access to and can see the reality of how that is important, right? If you're in the middle of somewhere and you don't have access to your cell phone, which is again completely reliant on space, even before Starlinks, like, I think the phone is the easiest one. That phone is a brick, literally, if you don't have access to the internet or anything else. So that's the first, like, hit your heart at home perspective of why we need to invest in space. Another one, like, there's a lot of technology benefits that come back to us. There's a common, you know, saying that we try to advocate every dollar invested in space brings 7 back down to Earth. There's been innovations, everything from diapers to, you know, Velcro and MRIs and some of these other common-ish examples that might get used, but at the end of the day, there's so much research that's happening on the ISS currently that is benefiting humanity every day. And one of the, again, a very easy one to understand is satellite imagery. The wildfires, the floods, you know, a lot of the climate change that people are dealing with right now, we wouldn't have any ability to predict that, control that, without the satellite imagery that we have up there. And it's been private companies in particular that have been really pushing that recently. Planet Labs, or just Planet, is one of those big innovators. They literally took a cell phone sized device, it actually was a cell phone, and then they turned this into a microsatellite, and the cameras and everything else is getting cheaper and easier. And so the problems we need to solve in space come back to us here on Earth. And the economy, yes, is mostly satellite-based for now. And there's enough benefits, I would argue, for that to be worthwhile. Again, all of our connectivity. And this is why I talk about one bad solar flare. Because one solar flare could wipe out not only our satellite infrastructure, but a lot of our ground infrastructure. And we're not ready.
Stations,
We're sitting here with our, I don't know, like, it's like having all your windows open during a hurricane. Like, we're just waiting for something to splash on us. That's a harder problem to solve, and which is why we need to put so much time and energy into it. I think when people will really start to see it is with some of the upcoming missions. When we're going back to the moon and we're going to Mars, it's going to excite people. It's going to feel real, and it's going to feel tangible. I was just watching, I was at this premiere of the Moonwalkers film by Tom Hanks, and a big partnership between them and I didn't even know these things about him, but he was 13, I guess, years old when the first Apollo missions were happening, and he was sitting in front of his television watching it, and over those 3 years, we sent 12 people to the moon.
Oh, that's crazy.
And that's what, inspired him to become, in many ways, who he is today. And, the Apollo 13 story, that's still a wonderful movie and holds up. The inspiration, the return on inspiration, that ROI is far, is more than enough for any of the investments in space. Because let me put it in context. NASA's entire budget is about 23.5, call it $25 billion a year.
Which is a fraction percentage of everything else, yeah.
It's nothing.
Yeah.
A World Cup games, a soccer game, $200 billion a year when we throw one of those together. Is that one World Cup worth that much? If so, then let's give NASA 10x what they've got. We spend money in other areas that aren't bringing us back, is much benefit to humanity. So we're not really spending that much, and especially not as a U.S. government. My hope is that there's actually an increase into that with the new administration. I think Elon is bringing certain efficiencies and cost savings through Doge. There's arguments, for what should and shouldn't get cut, obviously, but I think he is, regardless of anyone's beliefs of what he does, I think why he does it is still ultimately to get humanity to be multiplanetary. Yeah. That is what I still believe that's the core motivation for everything he does. That's why SpaceX, is going to let others do the smaller launch, because that's not getting us to Mars. He'll still have the Falcons, and ideally those will stay around because they're very useful.
Yeah, it's the most successful rocket developed ever.
And then you look at the other companies. Between Boring Company, it's not just for loops in Vegas and in Dubai. It's because when we're on Mars, we're going to need to live underground. There's no radiation protection, and the best way to do that is to be underground. The other things like automation and robots, like it's probably going to be boots, or it's probably going to be bots on Mars before boots.
I like that term.
Bots on the moon first as well. Like it's a safer way to do it, and now we can, with automation and AI that's been driven through Tesla and Optimus. There's a lot of these solutions, and that's why I think, again, these public-private partnerships are the way to go about doing these. And people don't change until they have to. And we don't want to wait until it's too late before we start to solve these bigger problems. And that's why, again, investments in space are necessary. The people that believe in it have been dedicating their lives for decades to this. Why we do these hard things. We go to the moon and we choose to do this. Why does Rice play Texas? Because they're hard. And we have to tackle the hard problems. We can't ignore them. We can't just pretend they don't exist. These problems are coming at us. We've got asteroids coming at us. We've got solar flares. We've got climate change. We've got conflict, happening here, and we need to unite humanity. And that's why I think examples like Star Trek are perfect kind of cultural motivators that have inspired, the Jeff Bezos and Elon Musk of today. The way we can use storytelling to inspire humanity to be better is, again, why I started to dedicate my life to this, because I also grew up watching sci-fi and fell in love with that and the idea of exploring new worlds, and it's exciting. And when we feel like there's a positive future, there's a glimmer of hope at the very least, we'll fight for it, we'll work for it, we'll build towards it. And there's a lot of chaos, there's a lot of sad news, there's a lot of conflict and kind of internal turmoil going on right now within ourselves, but also as a society. And I think space is just another thing that can brighten this up a little bit, And we use the same phrases, for motivational talks around never shine brightly and never dim your light. It's only in the darkness is when we can see the stars. And I think, again, when things get hard is when we can either choose to crumble or we can choose to push forward. And as we all face annihilation every day, it's also how we discover what we're made of. And I think those that have been pushing the barriers of what's possible in space know that because it's real, because it's hard, but it's also a lot of fun. And there's an opportunity we have today in our current generation to make Starfleet real, to live by that philosophy of infinite diversity and infinite combinations, because it's how we learn, it's how we evolve, and it's how we will continue to spread life out into the cosmos and not evaporate in some small little thing. Anyway, I'll get off my soapbox.
No. I mean, I think that's just a common thread and theme with like just humanity at large, and especially with bureaucratic systems.
Yeah.
Because, I mean, it's a large populace. We're reactive, not proactive in a sense. And I love that those terms you were giving out because, like, growing up, my sister would always tell me, it's like, gosh, I'm trying to remember it. It's like during hard times, you can, like, you can put 3 things in boiling hot water and you can be 3 things, right? You can be potato and get soft, you can be egg and get hard, or you can be coffee and get better. And I was just like, okay, well, here, I got my coffee.
Be coffee.
Here we go. It's like, I try so hard, but it's, it's one thing to, like, say that to yourself all the time. It's like another thing to be like, okay, like, I actually have to be like coffee right now.
I like that.
It's tough.
It's like Bruce Lee, but
yeah. I don't know where she got that from, but it stuck with me since. She's got some age-old wisdom, and but okay, and okay, so we've covered a lot. And, I think I'm excited about just the relationship with, I mean, because you're in Florida, I'm in Texas, and there is this interplay now with the 2 states. And I mean, you got other ones coming up, like Arizona, I mean, New Mexico, and they're all kind of specializing in certain different facets. And of course you have like, California and LA area. Seattle, Washington. I mean, anyway. So, the thing that I always like to see is like, at least this was my pitch, right? It's just like, unite the civil, commercial, military space of the state of Texas to plug into national and international global space efforts, right? And I think you're starting to see that. And, when we start to get those bots on the ground, it's going to be exciting to see what that future has to offer. But what you're doing in Florida, I would love for you to share a little bit more in terms of, okay, so you have Karman Line previously or currently with Earthlight Foundation. But then you kind of have this initiative, if I'm not mistaken, Legacy of Launch. You want to kind of like jump into that a little bit? Like,
absolutely.
What is Legacy of Launch?
Well, it's honoring the 75 years of launches from Cape Canaveral. This July 24th, is the 75th anniversary of the first rocket launch ever from the Cape. And it was this Bumper 8 rocket. It was a modified V2 for the technical geeks out there. And it was led by this guy named Werner von Braun, who we brought over during Operation Paperclip. And during that time, he was actually in White Sands. Before this, he was in White Sands Missile Range in New Mexico. And he was doing a couple things at the time. He was working to build those rockets, and he was working with Walt Disney to spread the vision of what humanity can look like if we start to explore the stars. And so again, I think that's the balance we always want to play, is inspire people with these dreams, and then build the hard tech to make them real. Unfortunately, or fortunately for Cape Canaveral, one of those rockets from White Sands landed in Mexico, blew up a cow near a dynamite mine, and it was both the most expensive hamburger ever made, and it made us realize that we needed to probably move this over towards the coast. And so the Eastern Long Range Proving Range was established, and that's what gave birth to Cape Canaveral. So my company, Karman Line, we've partnered with the United States Space Force Historical Foundation, which is actually a 35-year-old nonprofit, rebranded when the Space Force was created 5 years ago.
Were they the Air Force before?
Yeah. It was the Air Force and Space Missile Museum Foundation.
Like the Air and Space Museum in D.C. Okay, gotcha.
It was established to partner with the government on bringing private funds to preserve a lot of these historic launch pads, where the first satellites went into orbit, the Explorer 1, where the first humans from America went in space, Alan Shepard, where we first orbited, John and Glenn, the Mercury, Gemini, Apollo programs all started out on Cape Canaveral. And there was a gentleman named Harry Sands, Major General Harry Sands, who got a call from JFK one day as he's sitting here, after he gave a speech at Rice to talk about where we're going. He says, "We're going to the moon, and I need you to make it happen." So Major General was sitting over there in the Cape, and he started to oversee the beginnings of our space programs, which did start with the Air Force. The first Gemini or Gemini 2 capsule even still has like the Air Force logo on it. A lot of our first astronauts had come from the military and from the Air Force. And that I think is, again, indicative of the new evolution of Space Force, which is the most modern branch that was created. I still love the TV show that Steve Carell had.
Yeah.
There's some obviously it was comedic, and there's some criticisms that can come through comedy, and we use comedy to talk about these things. But I think we need to do better at telling the story of what American space programs look like, and the celebration that we're putting together to honor the 75th anniversary, and really more of a larger kind of campaign, is to wake people up, to let them know that we've been doing this we've been going to space for nearly 100 years. Like, it's crazy to say that, because most people still don't know that we have an international space station, that we've had a continued human presence 24/7 for the past 25 years. Like, no one knows, or not enough people know, I'll put it that way, what Cape Canaveral and Cocoa Beach is. There's still people that don't know what SpaceX or Starship is. And I feel like there's an opportunity for us to capture humanity's imagination. And so the legacy of Launch Campaign is designed not only to honor the past 75 years, everything from the early Army ballistic missile programs, the Air Force, and now the Space Force, the beginnings of NASA, the beginnings of our first bioflights, the first shuttle programs, the first reusable entry from the SpaceX Falcon 9 and the Falcon Heavy, all of these first, Blue Origin and their new Gallant rocket just launched from there. This is all happening in the Cape. And we've got not just this past 75 years to honor, but we've got the next 75 to look forward to. And can we invite everyone to be a part of that? From storytelling, from education side, from the actual launch providers, from investments in these new communities and these new opportunities. It's growing so rapidly. I've been out there for only a couple of years, but I've become one of the biggest advocates now for the Space Coast. Because again, it really does embody, in my mind, these kind of an ideal society in honoring past, history, embracing the beauty of nature. Like, we are human beings, like we are animals, we are part of nature. It's pretty important to us, but we also want to push the parameter of what's possible and inspire people, but also do the hard work that can turn these dreams into reality. And that's where the space industry that's out there is now no longer just NASA employees working on the shuttle programs, but it's all of this kind of new blood that's been brought in, these new ideas, these new types of companies, and it's so exciting. And so that's really what the Legacy of Launch Campaign is about, not only honoring the past, but building the future together. And we're going to be kicking off a big celebration. We're opening up this place called Exploration Tower that's been sitting empty for a few years because it's the best place to watch rocket launches. And we're partnering with a lot of the local companies, including NASA and Space Force and SpaceX and Blue Origin, to create this nonpartisan place for space.
That's pretty tough.
Yeah.
Bringing Blue and SpaceX in the same room to do the same. Yeah.
But we can do it, It was, when New Glenn launched, it was the same day as Starship, and even Elon's tweeting, like, did we just become best friends? So, even these friendly competitors, it's collaboration at the end of the day.
Yeah, there's a term, there's a gentleman by the name of Oscar Garcia with Interflight Global, I think, or Midland, he does work in Midland. Co-opetition?
Co-opetition, yeah.
That's what I...
Collaboration, yeah. But co-opetition, I think, is appropriate. And I think that's where, my company's found a way to somehow navigate this where, as Karman Line, we are space makers. We've talked about wanting to be the real place for real space. We want to prepare humanity to live, work, and play in space. And that's a standard kind of real estate term around the live, work, play. But I think it embodies what's needed around a lot of the spaceports that are under development. There's 14 or so spaceports in the United States right now. Only a couple of them are really, really active. But there's hundreds of these under development around the world. And like the old mining towns and the old oil town, we were talking about oil and energy, you generally have people move into the middle of nowhere. It's a good place to blow up rockets and test them. But they're human beings, and they need a place to live, they need a place to work, and then they need the aspect to raise their children, to go to schools, and to enjoy life and to play. And we're really building out a lot of the play right now, and that's why we can bring everyone together, because even at the Kennedy Visitor Center, in the Gateway exhibit, you have Blue and Axiom and Sierra and SpaceX and all the new players, and even ULAs and the Boeings and the Orion capsules all in one room, because that's what the future of space is. It's everyone cooperating.
Coopetition.
Coopetition.
I think that was what it was called. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, do you cooperate as you co-op?
That's a great question. I have no idea how to break that one up, but yeah, we'll go with it.
Yeah. I'll cooperate with you on that.
For sure. Thanks, gosh, I want to stop. I can't do it. I mean, I think it's really cool because, like, gosh, I've been to like 1 or 2 launches down at the Cape. Actually, I've never actually seen one because I get scrubbed. So you're presenting an opportunity for me to finally be able to like enjoy myself, play. But like, gosh, I did get the opportunity to see, what was it? KSC and the Space Center down over there, and I mean it's phenomenal. It's great. I mean it's really taken shape, and like you were talking about kind of exploration tower and how you're it's a 7-story building because like when you go there for the scrub, like there's all those great little spots, like on that strand, that strip. I forget the names of them all, like at bars and restaurants and stuff like that.
In Port Canaveral,
you can go over there, like hang out, get some beers, just enjoy the time with the good company and all that stuff. And then you get to see on the opposite end of the waterway, SpaceX, boosters and stuff like that. Prime for second, third.
Coming in on the drone ships,
crazy. But yeah, no, you're providing a sense in which like, because like the room and board, like, there's a lot of things I think that could be considered opportunities. And you're looking to kind of address that, right?
Yeah, I mean, I moved there a couple years ago, and I struggled to find places for a community, even despite it, being a bunch of call it space geeks that, I think align emotionally, mentally. And it's not just about that. There's not a lot of venues to get together, and that was a few years back when I set up our company. It's like we're living in this space rush. It's kind of like the gold rush, era, and there's a lot of people that are going out to mine for gold, and these are, call them the rocket companies, satellite builders. But we can do the picks and shovels. We can build the Levi's. We can make the burgers and build the hotels. There's obviously, like success stories around that. And at the end of the day, we can support those other companies because even Blue Origin and SpaceX are struggling to recruit and retain talent in places like Cocoa Beach, Titusville, Cape Canaveral.
Starbase too. I mean,
Starbase.
You're like a landman in the oil and gas industry.
Yeah,
it's getting paid very well, but
try getting your spouse there, your husband, your wife, bring your kids out there. Living in an Airstream can only last for so long.
Working like 20-hour shifts.
Yeah,
shoot,
that's tough. And if those people are suffering, then again, we as humanity suffer because it's holding back those companies from innovating and pushing forward. And so that's really what brought me out there. And again, it's like, be careful what you wish for. When I started my company, I said Disney business model with Starfleet ambitions. And now we're working with Imagineers to build out, honestly, a new Space Force experience, which is going to be a 100-acre facility out there in the next few years. And that's what we're using Legacy of Launches is this campaign to start to bring public attention to that, raise some funds, and really just get people involved. There's going to be events, volunteer opportunities, classes, workshops, working with the university infrastructure, and kind of, again, bringing in a lot of global partners because despite Cape Canaveral being a Florida American property, it's where the world in many ways goes to space. Axiom is a perfect example of a private company bringing people from all over the world, from India, from the UK, from South America, and sending them up to space to get up on the ISS, and that's all launching from there.
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that take on the Axiom bit. But I mean, I think the interesting thing about Axiom that we forget about is like we're flying on a SpaceX capsule and rocket. Like we're again, to your point, we're right now at the launch of the gold rush, right?
Yeah.
Like launch is the gold rush.
Yeah.
But entertainment, hotel, real estate, lawyers. I mean, and then also just like the system components and stuff like that too, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's a lot of things, I think, opportunities there. And with that development of Exploration Tower, right? And you're introducing all these different partnerships, international foreign trade, maybe, education, academic community, researchers, folks in private industry. You're now creating that kind of melting pot for the Cape, and you're allowing them to kind of get together, mingle, hang out, watch something blow up, not blow up, like go into
In a good way,
pieces, but blow up and like have some propulsion associated to getting outside of orbit. But so it's a good time, I really appreciate that that initiative and what you're building out. So just for clarity here, so you have like different phases, or so just walk through that.
Yeah, well, we started this kind of grassroots effort about a year ago. It was a couple of years ago as we started to look at how could we create some new facilities? How could we get Exploration Tower reopened? Because we were working with the Space Force Historical Foundation to start on renovations to their existing museum centers. And last year we received a very generous donation from Jared Isaacman to kind of kick off this effort to revitalize the Sand Space History Center, which is outside of the Cape Canaveral gate. And then on base, there's the 60-year-old museum that Major General Henry Sands set up 60 years ago, which houses the Explorer 1 complex. This is like the original blockhouse and launch pad that our first satellites, the launch complex where Alan Shepard took off. These are historical landmarks of great significance. And in the 70s, even 1.5 million visitors a year used to go to this outdoor rocket garden before the Kennedy Visitor Center popped up. And so it was one of the most popular places for American tourism. This is, as Disney was still figuring out what's happening in the Magic Kingdom. And now we want to kind of revitalize those centers. And so that's where the first phase is. It's starting with those revitalization efforts, and that's already kicking off. We've already raised a significant amount of money for that. And then the next stage is opening up Exploration Tower, which we want to have done by July of this year. It's a great building, pretty great shape. Port Canaveral has been working with us on finding the right way to do this. And now in partnership with Space Florida and Delaware North, which manages the Kennedy Visitor Center. So we've brought in kind of, the biggest players. And that's where, if anything, my company has a specialty is we're able to kind of navigate and negotiate and play, I wouldn't call it puppy master, but like kind of the deal broker between a lot of these partners. They all have their great histories, and we are just really trying to focus on how do we make this accessible for people. So by July of this year, the tower should be open. And then over the next 5 is when we would be building out more of the 100-acre Space Force experience facility at a location to be named. But I can't share that yet, but it's going to be a great experience for people to be able to, kind of like you go to the theme parks of today. You can go and not only explore, you can do training. There's nice hotels around it. There's a place for the adults and for the kids to enjoy. And in many ways, we want to make education fun. We want to excite people about these opportunities and then get them to pursue careers in private space, and whether it's NASA, whether it's Space Force. This is the way that we can realize that Starfleet future. And I feel very grateful that we've also been able to get the Roddenberry Foundation to support part of this effort. Cool. And that's the era of Star Trek. So it's kind of like
that's the
check
big
the
piece right there. Shoot. And rather than San Francisco, you're just going to have it down in Cocoa Beach.
Do it all, and that's where the spaceport growth is going to be like airports. It's not just going to be one place. You need 2 airports generally to travel. It's hard to land if you don't. And as point-to-point travel becomes more of a reality, I think that's another thing that will make it feel real, is that I can fly from here to Australia in 45 minutes if I use a rocket or a horizontal launch and landing spaceship. And I think business will support that. There's a great story behind FedEx. It was originally a guy that was bringing airplane parts back and forth on a little plane, but started traveling so much that it ended up turning into the big FedEx we have today. Because the efficiencies enough is where it's going to drive the business. That's where the economies will really start. As we not just move people, but cargo will be one of the first things that point-to-point will come into play. And it'll create a lot of cost savings and efficiencies as the cost of launch comes down. And then people will enjoy it. There's the space tourism aspect of it, which some people don't love that word because, like, Jared Isaacman is an explorer. He's not a tourist, right?
Yeah.
He's going out there risking his life. But as it becomes safe enough for everyday people to go, then why not? People fly not just for business; they fly for tourism, and it's a big part of our global economy to create trade, to just again be able to enjoy this great planet we have, and hop on a plane, go see some place, enjoy time with your family and friends. Like that's valuable. That's worthwhile, and I think we're entering into the age where that's possible and affordable in soon enough. It's not quite there yet, but organics were too expensive for anyone until we all started using them and valuing the importance of of that. There's it's coming, and I think that's the storytelling we'll get to do over the next year, because we have this landmark event on July 24th. That's going to be a great kickoff, and it's going to capture a lot of attention, not only within the space community, but our goal is to capture the wider audiences. We want to inspire the next generation and the current generation, because it's not just that jobs in the next 10 years that will become available. These are jobs that we need right now. We talked about some layoffs, but there's also massive vacancies at engineering firms in Northrop, and we do not really have the workforce with the right talent to match the needs of industry. And so it's a big opportunity for people of all ages. If you're an experienced professional with 40 plus years, all that experience will translate in a way. Maybe you need some minor upskilling. If you're a young professional in your 20s and 30s, now's the time to get those maybe entry-level jobs, but also to be training yourself online, because so much of this information is freely out there. And then, obviously for the youth, no better time than now to be the best at AI, to learn, I think, the communication and storytelling aspects, to learn how to socialize. We've lost a lot of that in the digital age, where people just don't have all the social graces, and I feel like that's part of the correction we're experiencing as society right now, is because there's so much rapid change. We're all under a lot of stress, emotional, social stress, and it's just kind of like an undercurrent, But that is also can be reframed, to use the psychological term, into excitement. And just like I can be stressed about my job interview tomorrow, I can be equally excited and turn that energy into positive momentum. And that's really the mission, is there's some scary shit happening. Sorry if I'm not allowed to cuss on this, but the universe is dark and cold and kind of wants to kill you. But it's also exciting to go out there.
Yeah, it's exciting. It depends on how your outlook and view in life, right? And I'm not telling somebody to view a certain way by any means, but it's just again, to the point, you can be coffee, a potato, or an egg. Yeah, those are your options.
Be coffee, my friend.
Yeah, just drink some coffee and call it a day, man.
Bruce Lee is now my new favorite artist.
Bruce Lee.
Yeah, not Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee said be water, but Bruce Lee says be coffee.
Okay,
I just made that up.
I like it.
I'm gonna test it.
I like it. Well, no, I mean, so if people want to learn more, or if where how do they contact you? Where do they go?
LegacyofLaunch.space. .com. We'll also have the other ones redirect, but LegacyofLaunch.com. Easiest way to get for more information right now and keep abreast of what's going to be coming. We'll be putting out more as it comes, but today you can kind of go on. We're going to have some select spots that we're going to invite people out to some key events. So get your name, your email address, and now. And over the next couple months, we're just going to be posting everything there. So
that's awesome.
LegacyofLaunch.com. It's the best way to get involved, to volunteer. If you want to contribute, you want to donate, you want to be a part of building the future, that's going to be the way to get in touch and really jump in. And who knows, maybe if this gets fancy enough, we'll start offering some rides to space.
That would be sick. Would you go?
Oh, I would go in a heartbeat.
Okay.
I'm going tomorrow, but
okay, tomorrow.
I just haven't booked the ticket yet.
All right. Gotcha.
I'm still waiting for the fates to deign me appropriate. But would you?
Yeah, man, I think so. I'm up for it. I don't think I would do the space balloon. Mm-hmm. I think I'd rather feel more safe doing
on a giant explosive rocket.
Yeah, as weird as that sounds. Yeah, I don't know how that sounds better, but yeah, I mean, like one of those cablings and stuff. I don't know. Like it's a very nice, luxurious, like Space Perspective or whatever has a very nice, luxurious $250. It's only $250,000, guys.
150.
Oh, is it 150?
You just saved 100K. Look at that.
There we go. So it's only 150,000. But yeah, no. For some reason, I feel like Dragon Capsule or something like that is more my speed.
Yeah, I mean, they're just well tested, battle tested,
Yeah.
And it's just like you don't want the first flight of an airplane. We tend to reuse them, and you want one that's been proven.
Yeah, maybe.
And I think that brings up a good point. Is reusability is one of the biggest opportunities and the biggest needs for us, because we didn't talk about orbital debris much, but there's so much space trash out there from the past way of operating, because generally we treated it like the oceans and like our environment in the past, where you just throw your trash everywhere and whatever, it'll out of sight, out of mind. But it turns out we might have toxified certain parts of the ocean. We might have thrown some trash in some other places that has come back to harm us. Now there's all these people are dealing with cancer and other things because we were throwing stuff where we shouldn't have. Similarly, in space, we've created so much orbital debris that there's now like 120 plus million pieces of things that are underneath a centimeter.
Yeah.
But that's like a bullet, and it's traveling at almost 18,000 miles an hour, and it can put a hole in pretty much anything. And then there's, call it another 50,000, pieces that we're tracking that are larger than that. But it's already too much. And one collision creates, a bajillion more pieces. And so as we're putting out our satellites, as we're putting out our astronauts, as we're going to start having everyday people go out and explore, we don't want to succumb to what's called the Kessler syndrome, which is where there's so much orbital debris, we lose access to space. And that really will be the dark ages. That really will be when we start going backwards rapidly, because we'll lose our satellite infrastructure. We'll lose the ability to go up there and repair and protect it. And that's a dark and scary future that, for me, is all the more motivating for us to go out and start to mitigate that. And there's great companies like Privateer that are working on this, and Space Cowboy happens to be the name of another one. There's some nice homegrown Texas companies that are kicking ass with this, and deorbit. This is why when we talk about space industry, launch is really only 2% of that. The rest, and Space Fund's done a great job of creating kind of a database that's openly available for all the new space companies that are coming out, and that that's where we caught up last week when they hosted the Texas to Mars event in partnership with TechSpace, or the Texas Space Commission.
Oh yeah, TechSpace.
What's the distinction between the TechSpace and the TechSpace Commission?
Okay, I mean, it's very simple. TechSpace was an initiative founded by Two Fish, and he stopped because he needed to put something on the moon. So TechSpace was just a nonprofit advocacy group. I assumed a leadership role. Initially, we started with the city of Houston, then we expanded upon the state. And it was really to advocate for a Texas Space Commission. So we were successful in doing that. And now it is a passively run entity. And, it's just, it's solved its mission. We have a commission now. There's an authority. And on top of that, there's TARSEC, which is kind of the academic aspect of the TSC. I mean, that's the distinction. There's no authority or anything of that nature pertaining to that of TechSpace. TechSpace was the grassroots campaign to wake the state of Texas up to say, hey, let's get a freaking authority outside the state, just similar to Space Florida, right? Like, we need a Space Florida, so let's have a Space Florida. But that's the distinction.
Well, kudos on that. It's a monumental effort, and I think it's a great example of what humans can do when we just rally around and we get a little bit of communicators to go out there and help to sell the vision. And now I think is a great opportunity for Texas and Florida to play together and spread this, because it's the Texas Space Commission's budget is, let's just say 10 times the size of Florida's right now.
Well, y'all started with quite a bit. Y'all had a good sum, and y'all were able to build out an incredible piece of infrastructure all across that coast. So.
And it's taken decades, and there's been a lot of private investment in that. So it's a great way for Texas to catch up maybe. And in the meantime, until there's that launch capacity, because I hope there's going to be a massive spaceport, launching on a regular basis down in South Texas, because you do generally need a eastern facing, as close to the equator as possible to make your launch efficient. But there's going to be opportunities for horizontal launch. There's stuff happening in Van Horn with Blue Origin's New Shepard, and I know that Midland's excited about some of the hypersonic capabilities. So there's going to be a huge opportunity to collaborate, and California, Texas, and Florida all kind of is part of called the Space Corridor. About equal number of 150 or so thousand space professionals. California has some launch capacity in Vandenberg, and a lot of the rocket companies are building out there. But I think that relationship between three of our could call it arguably some of the biggest economic contributors to the country can lead the way. And can we, as individuals and through our initiatives, find more opportunities to get people to cooperate. That was the one.
We're rolling with it now. There's no stopping. No, I think I mean that's what I think I really would like to see now is you have these state groups and these states. I mean it's the same thing that you saw at least myself within the state of Texas is it's hard to get mass bodies of municipalities and factions of groups to agree on stuff, right? Like you're talking about big metropolitan areas like Houston, Austin, San Antonio, Dallas, and then smaller ones like El Paso, Midland, Odessa, Boca Chica, Brownsville, and there's cultural components to it. There's environmental concern. There's political dealings. So now, I mean, if there's a way to, with those founded, agencies and organizations to now see the interconnected play between the two, be it Florida and Texas, be it California and Texas and Florida. And then what I really like seeing is Arizona popping up. I mean, they have a lot of gun-ho attitude and some extremely significant historic roots with ASU.
Biosphere 2's out of there. Yeah. University of Arizona. Yeah. So, I mean, it's exciting. And then, I mean, you see the international partnerships at play, too. You see a lot of, vocal activity there. The UAE is we're working on some projects with them out there, and it's, super inspiring. And just a little anecdote, their founder, Sheikh Zayed, was, sitting kind of in the desert watching the moon landing, live, and inspired his vision for the country as well to build out a space program. And so, again, the return on inspiration is worth it all at the end of the day. And even if there wasn't an economic return, which there is, I think the return on inspiration is one of the greatest cases for space, and happens to be a great unifier. And on all sides of any kind of aisle, I think people can get behind it. So that's our opportunity here. Yeah,
I think so too. I mean, on that note, next time you're in Houston, come on through. Maybe I'll have to go mobile with this thing and do this.
Let's do a Gallant conversation on the coast.
That legacy. Remind my name. Inspiration Tower.
Exploration. Yeah.
Sorry. Exploration Tower would be fantastic.
Yeah.
That'd be awesome.
Yeah.
We'll work it out, man, for sure. But no, again, Sean, thank you so much for coming through and sharing your insights. And Legacy of Launch, legacylaunch.com, and Sean Graham here, just leading the way to a bountiful, fruitful future in space. So thank you.
Live long and prosper, right?
There we go. Awesome.
All right. Thank you.
Thanks for joining this conversation with Gallant.
We hope you enjoyed today's episode and gained meaningful insight.
If you find this entertaining or helpful, subscribe and leave us a review.
And don't forget to share this conversation with your network.
For more resources and to stay updated with Gallant Insights and our amazing client portfolio companies, visit gallantculture.com.
Join us next time as we continue to explore perspectives within the industrial innovation space propelling us forward.
Until then, we ask you to stay thoughtful and curious.